On a crisp September morning in 2025, the usually disciplined calm of Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia was broken by an unusual sense of anticipation. For decades, this base has trained US Marines for battle abroad. Yet on this day, it became the stage for a historic gathering. The United States' top military commanders were summoned from distant posts around the globe, recalled home by the Pentagon's chief, Pete Hegseth. The air carried not the sound of marching drills, but the weight of a moment that promised to redefine the nation's understanding of war itself. Reporters clustered at the edges of the parade ground as convoys of black SUVs rolled in. Generals in full-dress uniform arrived, saluting each other with solemn precision. The mood was neither celebratory nor routine. Something in the air suggested that the commander-in-chief had come to issue a challenge rather than a ceremonial address. When the moment arrived, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth stepped up first. His words were brief but formal, announcing the arrival of the President of the United States. Cameras followed as Donald Trump strode toward the podium. The room filled with the rustle of uniforms as hundreds of the nation's most senior officers stood to attention. This was no ordinary meeting of the brass. Trump had summoned his generals not to discuss a foreign conflict or a distant crisis, but to confront what he described as a battle unfolding inside the nation's own borders. His opening words set the tone for everything that followed. He accused past politicians of sending American soldiers to police far-flung regions from Kenya to Somalia, while neglecting what he called an invasion from within. He argued that the threats facing the United States were no longer just on distant battlefields, but on city streets at home. In vivid language, he described crime waves and illegal immigration as a form of warfare. Unlike a foreign army, he said, these adversaries wore no uniforms, making them, in his words, more difficult in many ways. At least when they wear a uniform, you can take them out. The phrase war from within echoed across the hall. To the audience of generals and admirals, long accustomed to focusing on external enemies, the remark signaled a profound shift in priorities. Trump went further, saluting the service members who had helped carry out internal security operations, including National Guard deployments to several US cities. He told the officers he wanted to use some of America's most troubled urban centers as what he called training grounds for the military, naming Chicago as a next target for this strategy. The comment drew murmurs from parts of the audience and sparked intense debate later that day in Washington. For the president's supporters, it was a show of toughness and common sense. For critics, it sounded like the militarization of domestic policing. In the middle of his address, Trump struck a more personal note. He reflected on the reputation and morale of the armed forces, suggesting that in earlier years, the military had struggled to attract recruits. "You must have felt like you had a job that nobody wants," he said, before declaring that now the job was brimming over with people wanting it, a sign, he argued, of renewed respect for the uniform.
Decades that politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia, while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But
the message blended praise with a hint of exclusivity. The armed forces, he said, could now be selective, taking only the best. It was a call to pride for those in the room and a warning that the military's doors would not be open to all. Then, in a surprising pivot, Trump introduced an idea that contrasted sharply with his earlier warnings of internal war. He spoke about the creation of a new diplomatic body, something he called the Board of Peace. According to the president, this board would oversee volatile regions abroad so that American troops would not have to be drawn into conflicts there. He described how he himself had been asked to chair the board, a responsibility he claimed he had not expected but accepted. By invoking the Board of Peace, Trump sought to balance his hard-edged message about internal conflict with a promise of restraint overseas. "We don't want you fighting wars," he told the generals, "but if you have to, you're the most lethal fighting force in the world." It was both reassurance and reminder, diplomacy first, but the readiness for war ever present. The images captured that day at Quantico became instantly symbolic. A president at the podium, officers in rows, the nation's military power gathered to hear a call not to foreign battlefields, but to vigilance at home. For many observers, the scene underscored a larger debate about the future of US security policy. Since the end of the Cold War, the United States has often defined its strength by its reach abroad, from peacekeeping missions in the Balkans to counter-terrorism campaigns in the Middle East and Africa. Yet critics have long warned that the focus on distant conflicts left deep problems unaddressed within the country's own borders: urban violence, drug trafficking, human smuggling, and the strains of mass immigration. Trump's words at Quantico resurrected that debate with new urgency. Supporters hailed the shift as long overdue, a realignment of military priorities with the needs of ordinary Americans. Civil liberties advocates, however, voiced concern that using the military for domestic enforcement risked eroding constitutional safeguards and blurring the line between defense and policing. To place the speech in context, it is worth recalling the history of military involvement in domestic affairs. In the early 1990s, National Guard units were deployed in response to urban unrest in Los Angeles. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, troops were stationed at airports and borders to bolster security. Yet in each case, those deployments were treated as extraordinary and temporary. By suggesting that US cities could become ongoing training grounds for soldiers, Trump signaled a more permanent and integrated role for the military at home. For the generals seated in the hall, the implications were complex. Many of them had spent their careers planning for conventional wars, counterinsurgencies, or peacekeeping missions abroad. Now they were being asked to consider America's own streets as potential battlegrounds. The change raised practical questions about rules of engagement, coordination with civilian law enforcement, and the proper limits of federal power. Beyond the domestic front, the proposed Board of Peace introduced its own uncertainties. Would it act as a new layer of US-led diplomacy, complementing or competing with international institutions such as the United Nations? How would it reconcile America's traditional posture of global military dominance with a stated desire to step back from foreign conflicts?
You must have felt like, I have a job that nobody wants. That doesn't feel good. Well, now you have a job that is brimming over with people wanting it. They want it. And you're able to get a much higher quality because now you have your choice. You want so many. And we're going to have many, many people that aren't going to be able to join because of the fact that we don't need them at this moment. But think of it, what a difference.
Military analysts noted that the speech revealed a dual strategy, a kind of inward-outward pivot. By portraying cities plagued by violence as internal combat zones while proposing a diplomatic board to manage trouble spots abroad, Trump was redefining what counted as national security threats. Some critics called it a political move designed to appeal to voters who saw crime and immigration as the country's greatest challenges. Others argued it was a genuine attempt to redirect US power toward the places where it was most urgently needed. Either way, the speech underscored the tension between America's self-image as the world's peacekeeper and its struggle to maintain peace within its own borders. Reactions from Congress and civic groups came swiftly. Advocates of stronger border security praised the president for putting domestic safety first. Mayors and governors of major cities, however, bristled at the suggestion that their streets be treated as military training grounds. Civil rights leaders warned that such rhetoric risked casting immigrant communities and inner-city neighborhoods as enemy territory rather than as citizens to be protected. International observers, too, took note. Allies wondered whether the United States was signaling a retreat from its traditional global commitments. Rivals questioned whether the focus on internal problems might limit America's ability to project power abroad. For historians, the Quantico address already stands as a defining moment in the relationship between civilian leadership and the military. It highlighted the perpetual balancing act between safeguarding the homeland and maintaining influence overseas, a balance that every modern US administration has had to navigate, but few have framed in such stark, martial terms. As the event drew to a close, the hall rose in applause and salute as the president stepped away from the podium. Cameras captured his slow walk from the stage, the lines of uniformed officers standing at attention. Outside, the autumn sun dipped behind the parade grounds, casting long shadows across the rows of saluting troops. The phrase "war from within" lingered in the minds of many who had heard it. For some, it sounded like a long overdue rallying cry to confront crime and illegal immigration with the full resolve of the state. For others, it was a troubling warning of a future in which the military might be drawn more deeply into America's internal disputes. In the weeks that followed, debate over the Quantico speech continued in editorials, on television panels, and across the nation's political landscape. Some pointed to rising urban crime statistics as evidence that Trump's tough message was warranted. Others insisted that lasting security would come not from military deployments, but from investments in community development, education, and diplomacy. Whatever the outcome of that debate, the Quantico gathering marked a moment when the line between foreign battlefields and the home front seemed to blur, and when the President of the United States told his military leaders that the next great test of their strength might lie not overseas, but in the heart of their own country. As the cameras recorded the final scene, the Commander-in-Chief departing, the rows of generals still standing in respect, one thing was clear. The struggle over how to balance America's role as global power and protector at home was far from over. The echoes of that autumn day in 2025 would continue to shape the nation's security discourse for years to come.
President of the United States, our Commander-in-Chief, Donald J. Trump.
You know, they make up a statement and they said, you say it. We had 25 people that said he never said that. 25 that are brilliant people, but dumb as hell when it came to policy and common sense. Right, yeah. I don't want to use this. I want to use the big, beautiful, firm paper. I want to use the real gold writing. Standing up like this, brave, standing up at attention, the way I should stand all the time. And I interview the people on the street. I've never seen somebody say they don't, unless they're radical and paid off, because a lot of these think if we changed it back, would that be a nice idea? And Pete loved it immediately. Some people, like I'm on stairs, like these stairs. I walk very slowly. Nobody has to set a record for the year, and that's the best in far more than a generation. And for the Marines, more America, God bless you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. That politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are that. But we're running it based on common sense and based on love of our country. But I want to salute every service member who has helped us carry out this critical mission. It's really a very important mission. And I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military. Because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city. You must have felt like, you know, I have a job that nobody wants. That doesn't feel good. Well, now you have a job that is brimming over with people wanting it. They want it. And you're able to get a much higher quality because now you have your choice. You know, you want so many. And we're going to have many, many people that aren't going to be able to join because of the fact that we don't need them at this moment. But think of it, what a difference. And for peace in Gaza, we announced it, and we're going to create something that was my idea, but unfortunately I got drafted. It's going to be called the Board of Peace. And it's going to reign over that territory, and we're going to get that done. And they asked if I'd be the chairman of the Board of Peace. I wasn't counting on that. I had the idea for the Board of Peace. But I said yes, and I guess because of that, every leader, everybody wants to be on the Board of Peace. And we're going to watch over that very volatile part of the world and keep it non-volatile, so you don't have to get involved. We want to save you for other things or save you for nothing from that standpoint. We don't want you fighting wars, but if you have to, you're the most lethal fighting force in the world. And I would say that even 2-3 years ago, but now